someone said something very, very naughty, that doomsday did not require much time. And I was once fond of her, but now she's on my bad list. Yeah. So, yeah, you may have to sit in the corner. So, we know about Normans. And if we don't know about Normans, we're going to know a lot more about them tomorrow when Sir Frank or Frank the Great, depending on your taste, will be telling us about 1944. I'm giving you a little background for Frank's address. We have only a few hundred years to cover. Seriously, this term we'll be talking about the 11th and 12th, early 13th centuries. I don't want to go too far, but we will get up through Magna Carta, in case you're wondering when 1215 would come along in this course, probably by the last day, depending on how well I do today. Yeah, because you see from this depiction, he was not going out for Mr. Normandy. He is hardly the sort of individual we think of as being based from Charles Atlas or some sort of model. But obviously, that has very little concern. He had been William the Duke. His father, who had not been married to his mother, was Duke before him and had made of what had essentially been a territory taken by Norsemen, or as we would think, the Vikings, had in fact made this part of what we call France a model area in terms of civilization, in terms of the development of what we would call order. And he was there as an illegitimate, but legally the ruler, his father's choice. But I think it's always interesting, and they always do it in French, if not in English, always call him the King Duke, because he was both. And it makes for somewhat schizophrenic, because depending on where he is, will be the title that is appropriate for you. He is, of course, becoming king in England when he conquers it, whatever happened after 1066, right? But in France, he is one of the dukes and has to answer to a king, supposedly, theoretically. Now, what I'm saying here is essentially that when he comes from Normandy to England, among the many changes he will do is to institute what are called feudal ideas. I don't know whether they called it feudal, but the lawyers, legal historians in the 19th century did. So we do too. And here that means that land will be provided to the great lords, Normans, Frenchmen. No Englishmen need apply. This is all about the Normans. And they will be lay and ecclesiastical both. We have friends in both areas. But what they have in similarities, with one exception, is they are part of this Norman circle of authority. And if you are part of the old regime, you're pretty much out of it in terms of power, and they will have their rights feudally. Now, of course, many of you, and I know Frank will have more to say, well, maybe not.
I'll talk about Baylor.
Okay. The area which is illustrated here is part of the tapestry, which many of you have seen, I know. And I thought it was interesting because, of course, this shows Odo the brother. He was legitimate. It's kind of interesting. William was born from his mother when she was having a relationship. I won't call it an affair. Some have said she was a concubine. But when you use terms like that, I'm thinking, do we really know what all of that means? Whatever the case, that's how William came about. And then the Duke of Normandy must have then said, hon, this has just been wonderful, but I think we probably need to split. And I want to get you a really good husband. And I have a nice friend. He is a Norman lord. And you all will just be so happy together. You say, wow, I think I'm getting the brush. Yeah, you could say that. Well, anyway, he was a lord, her husband, and then Odo is the result. So that's kind of interesting when you think about it. He was legitimate. And he is the half brother of the king. And he, as part of the nobility, is a bishop. And you say, what are his qualifications to be bishop? Does he love the Lord? Is he saying the Hail Mary and the Our Father constantly? I doubt it. I think this guy was a serious warrior. But being Bishop of Bayeux was a nice position. And I mean, in terms of those checks coming in, yeah, that was really nice. Now, he, as you can see from the tapestry, was one of the warriors, which tells you something about the church up to that point. That is to say, the clergy sometimes, I'm a clergy, and yet I do love to fight. And that's something you say, gee, maybe if I just don't use a sword, I could just beat people to death. And so that's what he did. He you can see the action there, which I just think is very interesting. But he had lots of power, and he became Earl of Kent, and you can't get much better than that, except for being king, because Kent, is way down south, and Earl is a major position. You say, but wasn't there an English Earl that had been there before? Yeah, but he's pretty much resigned. Okay, so don't know about that golden parachute, but he has resigned. So we can figure that one. Okay. There he is. And I think, where are you today? Am I in France? Am I in England? Am I a bishop and I'm an earl? And then you just get up and say, I'm all of these things, and I'm happy and I'm free and I'm rich. Yeah, and I'm powerful. You can just imagine. I mean, this is right corny, but you get the idea of Odo's power. Now, Odo was part of the entourage, as we would call it, of William. But we understand, of course, that many people will be affected by his policies whether in Normandy or England. And primogeniture is one of those. Because, of course, as we know from our own legal history, primogeniture, the inheritance by the eldest, well, son back in the day, will be extremely important for land possession. There were, of course, other important concerns in terms of the rights of kings and so forth, but I just wanted you to notice that particular one of property law because of how important that will be, not the idea of dividing it up. And so, how will this affect things? Well, you can well imagine, even as late as our own time, in terms of land law. Now, another important consideration, and this is always talked about quite a bit, the Salisbury Oath. Many of us have been to Salisbury and the cathedral there and Stonehenge and so forth. But here, he gathered together all the great lords. And again, they would include the clergy as well as the laymen. So I would think it would be a fairly large assemblage, according to the Chronicle. I guess somebody could call in sick, but I think I would be there, if you think about saying, yes, convene, I've got to go to a party, or, instead of coming to class. But that's another whole issue. But here, basically, all of these people basically had to pledge their homage to him, even if they were not direct vassals of the king. And some of you all will remember when we've talked about fealty and homage before, when someone held land from a lord and he promised to be faithful, swore, and then he said, I'll become your man. And all of this now is made to be done twice. You do it to your immediate Lord and you do it to me. And if you don't, then we're all coming for you. Now, again, how effective is this? Well, it's only effective as people's word is. We assume, though, that from the legal point of view, this is very important because in the day, much depended on people's word. Even as late as the 11th century, sometimes everything wasn't necessarily in writing and you don't have photocopies and all the rest of it. Basically, it's all dependent on what you and I agree on and what we accept. And if it doesn't happen, then somebody's going to be in trouble. So that's like sub-vassals then. If you go against me and I'm the king, I'm your lord. And don't you forget it. And you're going to pay. You want that fief? Then you get down. Yeah. Now talk about 20 portraits. And according to, if my reading is not completely off, it looks like 1982. Am I right? And I'm thinking, really? But we'll let it go. I just thought the illustration is an interesting one. And Matilda's interesting for a number of reasons. We're going to have a lot of Matildas. Don't worry. She's one of many. But in this case, She's from Flanders. You say, well, I love Flanders. Oh, Belgium is so nice. Yeah, NATO, Brussels, all that we want to know. But in this case, if we are the King Duke, Flanders is all about getting to know you, getting to know all about you, because they are right north of our area. They were back then. And the idea is alliances. And her father, it was an arranged marriage, but it seems like it was a very good marriage. And they always talk about he didn't have any little no-nos and they were faithful. And you say, really? A king was faithful to his wife? That is weird. But it's true that in this case, there was a strong relationship, and she is one of the few queens that stands out as being, if he's in Normandy, she may be keeping things tight in England and making sure that everybody stays in line, and being a very, very important part of the regime. Uh, they had, I think, or she had 8 or 9 children, uh, 4 of whom seem to have survived. But Matilda was a very important part and would live for years. So she had a very important role to play, and she could be trusted as opposed to his half brother Odo. And let's look at the children. We don't get too far down the tree, but you'll just notice this is basically letting you see the children of the Duke, and you see there's Robert, he's the eldest, and you like say, oh, I bet he was so happy. He and Bobby were together. Yeah. No, it didn't turn out. Sometimes in the best of families, there can be little spats, and we will see that Robert was not his father's favorite. And the second son, about whom more later, was named after his dad, William, then Henry, and then finally the daughter, Adela. And gosh, she started dating someone from the Loire. And you say, gosh, I wonder where Blois. Could that be next to Normandy? Yes. Thinking, yeah, isn't it wonderful that Cupid, when he strikes? Yes, but that will become a very, very important relationship. And we'll see more of that later on. But just wanted you to be aware of William and his descent. More from the tapestry, and you see William. Well, Willem moves. Can anybody see up at the top Odo and EP as an Episcopal? Yeah, bishop. And yeah. And there is Robertus. Yes. And you say, oh, a beautiful trio. Yeah, I know they're happy and loving. Well, not so much. Apparently, this bishop was a bad influence on his nephew, and Robert and Odo apparently collaborated in efforts to take over Normandy. I guess William couldn't die fast enough for them, so they decided to take over. And when he found out, he couldn't do anything about his son except, I mean, this is one of those stories. I mean, you would, years ago would read it. You know, remember what was it called? McCall's or Ladies' Home Journal or something, the story of the heroic mother Matilda who tried to bring them together. And but I don't think there was much hope for that. In any event, Odo ended up in the clink, yeah. He was incarcerated. Imagine that, a bishop. You say, gee, I guess I can give a little talks, Bible study in prison or something. I don't know about that, but he stayed there for several years before William died. And at the same time, Robert and his father remained on the outs because of conspiracies. Sort of David and Absalom thing, I guess, if you know that story. But after, to turn to the church, some of you remember Stigand. He was the English Archbishop of Canterbury that was, in the view of many, less than qualified. And certainly the popes didn't approve of him. I said to one of you, and you won't forget this, 1073 to 1085. I know you've got it stored away already. That was the pontificate of Gregory the Seventh. So in case anybody asks you, I know you never know. People can ask the strangest things. So if you're on a quiz show, I know there's so many people out there who can challenge your chronological knowledge. But that's Gregory VII. And he really wanted to clean up the church. And you think, how would Odo do under his regime? Not well. And you get together, he would get like a really bad grade, It's like barely satisfactory. And so when William comes in, he basically is authorized by the Pope to let Stigand go. No golden parachute, you're out. Because not only are you a lying, no good Englishman, but you're also not doing a good job. Your managerial skills, you're kiss off to Anglo-Saxons. I mean, there's nothing to recommend you. So you're an ex-Archbishop of Canterbury. And now we put in one of the individuals who is now called blessed. You say, gosh, I'd love to be blessed. Yeah, I bet you would. That would be step number one on the road to sainthood. So many of you may already be blessed, and I'm really happy for you. But you're still a long way from saint, okay? No offense. You're good. I'd rather be venerable than blessed, but I'll take what I can get. But this is our land, Frank. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to stir up a campaign now, but I'm just telling you, I think Lanfranc is really outstanding. And I want to say St. Lanfranc, but I can't. Yeah. I know. So just let me say that he becomes Archbishop of Canterbury for William. I guess William gives him the interview. He was Italian, like many people in Normandy who came in through the Benedictine monastery system. He is a philosopher, scholar, and he has credentials in terms of publications, as we would say in academia. He has the skills as a leader, great abbot. and he is very loyal to the Duke. So now, with Stiggan out, Lanfranc is in. And you ask yourself, gosh, you're building him up so much. Why can't he be a saint? I'll tell you why. Yeah. Have you heard of, this is not a nice term, kiss up to somebody? Yeah. I think he's a little too kiss up. But before I note that, he was an authority in philosophy, canon law, in Normandy as well as England. He will institute a system which will go on for centuries, in which the clergy will be under an entirely different legal system than the laity. It will cause some problems as time goes on, but as in many systems, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Have you ever heard that expression? In the case, it just means that I get in trouble, I do a no-no, I'm a clergyman, so there's a legal system to deal with me. And I may lose my job over it. But I'm not like you. You're just a layman, loser. And so there will be different systems because we have important, it's like you get the better parking place, you say, look, I'm a doctor, that. So that's the same thing with these people. They have their own legal system, which some of you already know the story of Beckett, so we know where that's going. That's our land, Frank. And wherever it's possible, he and William will stick together. God, I mean, William had a lot of other things on his mind other than the church. But he wanted someone who was there with him because, gosh, he would even put Lanfranc and Matilda there in charge. So he really depends on him. He's very important. Reforms, we love reforms. The clergy need to stay away from the relationships with women. That's not appropriate. I mean, it seems like it would be nice, but it's wrong. The church condemns it. And so, more or less, there's a reform movement. Because up to that point, I think they just sort of winked at it. Simony. Now, if I call you a simoniac, you're not going to like it. And I'm sure you would never do this, try to sell a position in the church if you had that power. Or even give it. I mean, like bribe somebody. How would you like to be a bishop? That kind of thing. Oh, did I use my scary voice? Yeah. So standing there in the corner. The idea is that people use church lands and so forth as a wonderful opportunity if they could then sell it and say, you've got the kid there and you could make Junior a bishop and he'd get these lands and he could hold them in that position. It had gotten to be so very bad in Anglo-Saxon times that they decided, these Normans with Lanfranc, to try to clear this out and basically say simony is wrong and you can't do that anymore. And they'll say, oh, really? Yeah. I mean, and of course you say, it's one thing to say it, but it's another to actually enforce it, isn't it? Simony is a very powerful force, especially in terms of church lands, of which there were many. Meanwhile, while everything seemed to be good, the folks in Rome, and again, Gregory VII, 1073 to 1085, wanted William, he sent him a nice letter. My son, I love you very much, and I'm very glad you're the new king of England. I know we're going to be happy, and you're a wonderful Christian boy, and I love you lots. So, you know what happened, don't you? Way back when, Gregory first sent missionaries and established Christianity in what became England. And ever since then, we in Rome have loved England. You're really special to us. Peter hearts you. So he tried every way he could. And of course, what did the English king say? Heck no. I am not doing any ring kissing to you. I mean, the idea of surrendering that kind of authority, if you just said, gosh, just let me get down. Peter's foot is just so desirable. No, 1073 to 1085. And on it goes. The same with the idea of appointment of bishops and putting in people that were suitable to the king. He struck out that way. So William, while he would support some of it, he and Lanfranc, and there's no reason to doubt that Lanfranc was supportive of the king. I mean, Rome's quite a distance back in that day. So it's easier to say no to the Pope than it is to the king. And that will change, but not for the blessed Lanfranc. He's still blessed. I think he got the Beatus blessed in 19th century sometime. So the process, I don't know if it'll go any higher, but you could send in letter recommendations. Meanwhile, what was he like? Let's look at the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Rigid, extorted, many marks of gold. Now, here's a word, and I know none of you would, I know you're generous, kind-hearted, lovable. And nobody here is avaricious. Yeah, those are the gold lovers. And that was definitely him. He fell into covetousness. And you say, this is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. You know that went on until the 12th century? That's amazing, isn't it? The little monks there. Now, these are not big shots. They're just your little history nerds. They're sitting there in some monastery working on the Chronicle. And personally, I would have kept this in a private place because I wouldn't be saying these things waiting for some sort of Norman Stooge to come in and say, and look what they said about you. You know, it's like that would not be so nice. Greed. And then he goes on to say, well, I mean, many people love hunting, on others, Disney type people just love to Bambi and so whichever way you go, William, you'll see, says, I love the tall deer as if you were their father. Isn't that nice? Oh, all my kids. But he goes on to say, his rich men bemoaned it, and the poor men shuddered at it, meaning, in other words, they couldn't go hunt animals. Boy, that would kill a lot of people around here. Yeah, deer hunting and all that. Yeah, and you say, that's out. And the reason it's out is because, of course, the king wants to have it for himself. So, more or less, then, as the last line points out, may Almighty God show mercy to his soul and grant him forgiveness of sins. In other words, he's got a lot to answer for. Okay. So it's an interesting idea. But the most important thing I would like you to know about him, because it can't be dismissed, although some people might try to. I won't call any names, scorn anybody or hurt anybody. But to know Doomsday Book is one of the most important documents that we have in medieval English history. So that sweeping document, I don't think I'll be around for 2087, but those of youngsters, you might be. And so in 1987, which I was around for, I was just happened to be in London, and there was a wonderful celebration of Doomsday Book. I'm not saying in the streets. we were very, we were very contained there at the public record office, you know. So we were all, yeah, I know. But oh gosh, to be there in 1987 and celebrate the 900th anniversary, and we were all just partying. I mean, it was quite a big day for archivists and others who are concerned about that, because this is the most complete document we have of economic and social relationships in medieval England. And it is done because the king wanted it done. This is a survey, taking polls, tracing who has the land and how much you have. And I mean, some of us would find statistics kind of not very interesting, but you can understand why it's important. Many of you may have friends who are with the lovely people, and we'll get to know them better in April. We always do. Yes, yes, yes. You know exactly. I know. Don't get sentimental on me. The IRS. We always need more. There's no end. And that's what Doomsday Book was all about. It is not a complete document, since there were part maybe destroyed by the age, but it's absolutely amazing to think how much is left. Now look at this. Boy, they couldn't just erase like we do on computers, you know, typing, and you get rid of it. So they just scratched it out. Could you imagine being a little monk or somebody who's hired to do this, and you're thinking that could get, maybe you have to be really careful. Wouldn't you think? You take a lot of breaks and make sure. Yeah, because it's amazing to me, because I mean, all the people get bored or look away and start thinking about something they shouldn't be. And then all of this. But you can see, I hope, up there, TERA at the top, land. You see that Terra, and then you see the name. There's a Walter. You can WALTER. Used to have a teacher who tell me if you just look at it long enough, you'll get it. And it says son, son of, and then after that. But it goes on to list their lands and who they hold from. And again, it all has to do with now we know who you are. And we need a check. Not necessarily from the heart, from your account. But we know you love us. We know that. But This is the way it is. But if you look at it, I mean, if you ever, like I say, 2087, if you're there for the next round of partying, then it is quite celebrated in terms of medieval English history. I noticed they never attempted that again, so it's kind of interesting to think about. Maybe he was as covetous and miserly as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle thought. He had to leave Normandy to Robert, but he didn't want to. Isn't that awful? But he apparently despised him. And he had, his brother in prison. But he said, okay, thanks to the law, you get the duchy. But I conquered England and you can't have that. So that's how we have the separation of Normandy and England. Have you ever thought about that? It's just because of William's dislike of his eldest son. Dislike is a mild word, but I would say this is that sort of thing. Like, I just can't deal with him that way. So he has no choice about Normandy, which is odd, but that's the principle of primogeniture, and they don't have that with the English monarchy, apparently, at least at that point. So he gives the throne to William. And the youngest son has a nice check, and I suppose the daughter would have received a nice dowry to become the Countess of Blois. And there he is, and very importantly so, Stephen of Blois. So that will be all taken care of. William is going to get England. Henry's going to get a nice check. And we have the Duke going to the older son. And here it is. I always say maps always look so nice and clean. And we know that that's not real life, but I thought what was interesting, see the little purple, that's the area around Paris. And that's the area that the King of France controlled. And you say, but what about the others? Well, he is the suzerain. They all bow the knee to him. Yeah, right. But that's the theory. Theoretically, they're obedient and they love him as their Lord. I know. Or else they may go to hell. Okay. So, I mean, this is their Christian responsibility. Now, the red is going to be the area that will be ruled by the Normans. You say, wow, that's really nice. Indeed it is. Here's Blois. And then look at Matilda's home up at Baldwin Land, that's Flanders. And you say, are we close to them? Yeah, both ways, both in distance and in love. Yeah. In other words, Anglo-Flemish love is going on. And who is it directed against? The man in purple. Yep. The King of France. You say, well, that's hurtful. I mean, yeah, I know that's politics for you. But it's interesting though, all of the areas that will go on. Because we haven't even gotten yet into Anjou and Poitou and Aquitaine. You say, Is all of this coming? Indeed, it is to a classroom near you. I'm just pointing out that these are just the immediate areas. And can you imagine? And you talk about nowadays, seems like everybody commutes to work and all that, and speeding too. I'm pointing out to you, can you imagine the commute between Normandy and England? Monday, say, Matilda, hon, you take care of things, baby. I'll be back Friday. Yeah, yeah, a big week of killing and beating up people, and then I'll be back and we have a nice weekend. Go to mass on Sunday. But but I mean, could you imagine how it was to be the king of England and at the same time Duke of Normandy? Because you don't want to stay away too long and people think, oh, he's not that strong. He's not powerful. RateMyDuke.com. You think, you know, sort of like he doesn't care. He's kind of slack. Yeah. And so that's why they back and forth. And remember, many of these lords had lands in England and Normandy. And so they themselves might be commuting, going back and forth. You don't want to be like, let things go, because people might get a sense you don't really care. So it's amazing to me how much of the sort of Anglo-Norman would be going on. Now, does this mean that the English peasantry were better off under Norman lords? I don't think so. I think if you're a peasant, you're a peasant. So it's not like, wow, this is great. These Normans are such good lords. They were so much better than the English ones. No, I just don't think so. I think lords are lords, and meaning they want you to work and they don't give you a lot of breaks. So Lanfranc, I gather, was about the only person that William trusted, and I think for good reason. And as a result, he maintained the sort of authority in terms of, like insurance if something were to happen. And something did happen in 1087. He's buried there in Normandy because he died there following another attack. I mean, it was like, not surprisingly, if you had been in the insurance business back then, I don't think you would have written a big policy on it. I mean, it was sort of bound to happen because he was involved in war throughout his life. And as a result, he died. At this particular time, he was doing something that technically, in feudal law, if you really want to do the right thing, he was doing a no-no. He was fighting his lord. I know you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to love your lord, not try to kill him. But instead, he was wounded himself, and he subsequently dies. William I's death, of course, was predicated on the idea that after him, Normandy and England would be separated. And did I do something wrong?
By connect, I don't know.
Give
you an ad.
I'm sorry.
I'm giving you an ad.
Oh, hang on. Okay. Okay, I like. Well, they've had their endorsement. Well, that doesn't matter. Let me just try to conclude this by saying that with the separation of the two, there will, of course, be ever more the sense that somebody's going to want to get the other ones. They're never going to say, This is yours. I don't want to take it. I don't want to hurt you. I just love you very much. All we need to do is pull out Cain and Abel. Say, did they love each other? Not so much. So the same will be true when we talk about Henry and Robert. And of course, understanding how that relationship will cause constant threats and involvement. In other words, it never is as good when you hear people say, whatever happened after 1066? Well, it would appear that until 1087, at least there was an England and Normandy, and now they are united, but only temporarily. But what's going to happen if you've got one Lord in one place and one Lord in another? Are you going to have to make a choice? Because it can be so hard. I love exploitation and abuse in both places. Must I choose? Can I continue? And the answer is probably not. So I think we will pick it up with William and the rest of the story in terms of the immediate family next time. And I promise, at least I hope, that yes, that it won't be quite as wild. Will, I appreciate your cooperation and staying with me that we had today. Thank you all so much. Thank you.